correct information from Tipitaka or from Pali English Dictionary or from whatever. That can be decided. If we have difference because we lack experience, we lack knowledge, help us to fill up the vacancy of knowledge. Show the proper information, quotation from the Pali sources. Then we solve the difference. But the other kind of differences lay hidden and come maybe closer to your mind. That is different in attitude, not in knowledge. Attitude comes from feeling that it should be like this. Come from opinion, not the fact, but preference. I prefer this English term to that one. Although they are meaning the same thing, but I prefer this one. Whereas the other prefer another one. See, this is the taste, this is the opinion, this is feeling. Quite difficult to solve this difficulty. That's why we say, if we have different opinion, we agree to disagree. That's okay. But if we have different angle of information, we are provided with the total picture of information. Then difference disappears. As scholars, we have to accept the fact, the truth. But it's quite difficult to change your opinion, your preference. That's why we come in here to solve the difference related to attitude. All of us are scholars in Pali and English, but we have different attitudes. I mean, in most of the situation. So that's why I request you to solve attitude difference, so that we can reach agreement in academic terms. If you cannot sacrifice your opinion, your attitude, in spite of the fact presented, then we just take note that we agree to disagree, or just include your presentation in the list of the glossary terminology. With this awareness in our mind, I think it is not difficult at all to work together in a fairly separate and the Buddha and the Buddhist brothers and sisters. Brothers and friends, I would like to initiate the discussion in the afternoon and welcome your participation and contribution in this workshop, which is a historic meeting, a symbolic meeting of the project. I take the opening speech of Minister of Culture to be the symbol of launching the project officially here internationally at the international platform, United Nations Center, Conference Center this afternoon. So the board has been kicked, so we have to move it on and finish our task. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And for our first section of today will be team representatives raise issues to be discussed. Our moderator for this section will be Venerable Professor Dr. Piyaratna Walmorube, Professor of Buddhist Studies at the Buddhism Faculty, Mahachulalongkorn Rajavidyalaya University of Thailand. May I humbly invite Venerable Professor Dr. to be the moderator of this section. Thank you. And before we go on, during the meeting, may I request your cooperation. Please kindly put your electronic devices into silent mode. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Most venerable, respected venerable sirs, and distinguished scholars, and dear friends in the Dhamma, since yesterday we are having this discussion related to Tripitaka English version translation project, and especially focusing on translation and terminologies consistency. We had very fruitful and wonderful discussion yesterday, and today is still to finalize. If there is any issue to be concerned related to terms and terminologies, of course, there are varieties or the various words are appearing, terminologies are appearing, as we all aware that. Sometimes when you go through the Tripitaka, according to the lexicons, for the word Nibbana has 41 synonyms, and word Saddha has almost 16 synonyms, and word Dhamma, according to the commentaries, there are more than 18 synonyms, and for the Buddha, there are 32 synonyms. So we can imagine that how wonderful about these terminologies, and when we put into the translations, there might be not easy task, but still, as our most venerable chairman mentioned that this is a group or the teamwork, since we are cooperating with each other and making some conclusions regarding this glossary and also the other terms and terminologies, it is not might be that much difficult since we are working together. So in this afternoon session, we have almost like maybe 40 minutes to 50 minutes, and according to the this translation project, we have divided almost like 13 teams as Thai versions of the Tripitaka or the Siamese version. It has 45 volumes, and according to that category, and we are divided into 13 teams. So, however, that in this afternoon sessions, is still like if any venerable or scholars, those who are engaging with the translation project, we have like a Vinay team or Digha Nikaya team, and Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Uddaka Nikaya, and Abhidhamma. So, before going to start with Majjhima Nikaya, let me to ask any venerable or the representative from Vinay team or those who are translating Vinay Pitaka, especially like venerable most venerable Bhikkhu Brahmamoli or other representative from your team would like to share any ideas. Still maybe like 7 to 10 minutes you can. Yes, venerable. Please turn the microphone.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to, first of all, to thank everyone for the discussion we had yesterday. It was very interesting. I thought very useful for myself to hear the opinions of other people on that. And just based on that discussion yesterday, I wanted to summarize what I think are the main things that maybe we can agree on today, if that is also seen as something positive by the other speakers or the other people here present. The first thing is the idea of having a shorter glossary, which was actually, I thought, a very interesting idea. Instead of having a large glossary of 1,000 terms, maybe shorten it down. I think that has a lot of advantages. It has the advantage it's easy to have a consistent glossary. It's easy not to duplicate translations. It is easier to come to an agreement if you have a shorter glossary in there. And it's actually easier to implement when you actually do the translation work. So I think it has a lot of advantage having a shorter glossary there. And if we do agree on that, I would maybe suggest that we have a goal on the length of the glossary. Maybe a goal can be 100 words, and if it is more than that, then so be it. But having I think a very restricted goal that focuses the mind on what actually are the really important issues, the really important terminology. So my suggestion would be then to set a goal of maybe 100 terms and then take it from there. That would be my first point, so I basically agree with a number of speakers who were speaking yesterday. The second point I would like to make is my suggestion yesterday, which also other people seem to agree with, is the idea of having separate glossaries for separate parts of the certificate. So for the Vinaya, there will be an additional glossary apart from the core glossary that we agree on. There will be a separate glossary for the Vinaya Pitaka. I think that actually is required because the Vinaya Pitaka is a very specialized kind of literature whereby the salient and important words are actually very different from what we find in the Sutta Pitaka or the Abhidhamma Pitaka. And it would be my second suggestion. My third suggestion, which was also mentioned yesterday, is how to deal with vocabulary or meaningful words when they are outside the ordinary meanings that we have in the glossary. And variations in meaning of individual terminology. There are words that we may that are going to be outside of the terminological list. And for those words and meanings, I think it might be useful if we have a common source that we can draw on. And a few people yesterday mentioned Margaret Cohn's Dictionary of Pali, which is, I think, becoming very standard reference work these days, especially for English-speaking scholars. And I would suggest that maybe we can agree on using that as a common reference work, and then creating...
Recording in progress.
And then creating a common source which will actually create, by default, greater consistency in the translation if we use that. So those are my contributions. So to a large extent, just agreeing what people were saying yesterday, and hopefully we can come to some final agreement on these issues today. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Venerable. And so our most Venerable Chairman is here. So your suggestion is that to conclude the vocabulary into such a short text, maybe like 100 or something like that. So I'm not going to comment on that. It is up to the our chairman and also the glossary compilation committee. Most Honorable Sir, would you like to share some point on this?
I'd like to hear from Nikaya.
Okay, so next Majjhima Nikaya team, and here we have very presentation on translation and terminologies by Emeritus Professor Dr. Maniratana Swasdivanna Ayutthaya. So welcome, and you can do your presentation, and later on we can follow up.
Turn on microphone, and you want to share the information on the screen? Please turn on microphone first.
Anyone from IT could help?
Please wait a few minutes. Okay.
Thank you very much. So, this is how important we have to know the technology. Okay, my presentation today is translation, technology, standards, and quality. Our mission is that we have to translate 45 books, and the source text is Yamrat. And then, according to the framework or the guideline, we have to do something about centralized database in order to ensure correspondence, register style, consistency, standards, and quality, and so on. So our first issue is that because as far as I can collect information, Sayamrat has two versions, right? Thai alphabet in Pali and then Thai translation. If we resort to Sayamrat, so how can our foreign translators, do they read Thai or they can use Pali text version of English because we have to base on Sayamrat, right? So this is my first issue. There are 4 basic translation components. Any translator who wants to jump into professional translation has to know the 4 basic translation components. The first component of factor is linguistics. So it's everything, like yesterday that we discussed about how to have meaning here and there, or even just like the moderator mentioned that there are 40 or 50 Nibbana meaning. So why? And the second factor is translation studies. We have to separate from linguistics and translation. It's not the same thing. Because if we consider the same thing, it means that you do code switching, you don't do translation. And the third factor is for standards of translation. I think everyone knows about standards. We couldn't do things without standards, right? And the fourth one, which is, I think is very important, is technology, because we consider this project as a big data, million of words. You cannot do manually and to finish it on time or in time. We have to use, exploit, optimize technology as much as possible. The 4 basic translation components. Forgive me if I don't touch much on glossary, because I think we have to know the macro or the overall picture of how translation is first, because we do translation, right? I will start with linguistics. I think everyone knows about linguistics. So under linguistics, we have to know phonology, morphology, syntax, semantic functions, pragmatics. So what we touch, what we have frequent touch is on morphology, the meaning of words, the meaning of vocabulary, or the meaning of terminology. But maybe we don't have time to touch on. We cannot have the meaning until we have network of syntax, how words relate to each other. When words relate to each other, they give meaning. Okay. The 2 or 3 examples I just try to collect in a very short time. One thing that maybe it's concerned not just the linguistic, it has to come to translation studies as well, translation theories, I mean. For example, we put the blessed one here. We translate right. But why for Bhikkhu we transliterate? So these 2 things, you see, according to translation studies, it destroys the harmony of the network of meaning, I mean semantic relations. another thing you see, because I think, forgive me, I have to mention Venerable Sombod, because he feed in very frequently into our live group how to translate this and that. So I just put parimukhang or whatever. So what is the last answer for this term? And the second example, the first one, I focus on morphology, the study of meaning of words. And now I come to relation or network of sentence. For example, this one, if only prince what and what verb possess of such calm. This one, you see, if we take a look just only in English, we don't know exactly how are said, right? Because for conditional sentences, we have three levels. What this phrase or this sentence refer to? First level, first degree of condition, second degree of condition, third degree of condition. If we know about this one, then we can choose which pattern we put, which syntax we put into our English target text. Number 2, for the basic components. If we cannot cross over linguistic, we cannot go to translation. We have to be very specialized or very good at linguistic first. Then we go to translation studies. The first thing, I don't mean just theories. I include practice and experience. Okay? So the first one is translation terminology. It's not translation as we discussed yesterday, because translation in that particular scenario or area, just only words or vocabulary or whatever. Translation terminology is the way or how to translate the method. I put endophora, exophora, laguna, ad hoc formulation, transliteration, prosody. We have to know about this one in order to make judgment which method we will use, not just blah and blah. For example, if we come across untranslatable words, we have to resort to laguna. So we have to study how to make it. Or if we want to transliterate, we don't want to translate, but we want to transliterate to speak. So we have to know how much, what is the ceiling that we can use transliteration, what is the ceiling that we can interpret. We cannot go whatever we think, not just from our experience. Number 2 is theories, you see. We know about word forward, send forward, send, short text, target text. Okay, if I ask what is translation, so I can get hundreds of definitions. But under the 100 definitions, there are only 2, just only 2. It's source text focus or target text focus. It's just only one continuum from literal to free translation. We have to make judgment first. And then yesterday someone talked about simplification, but no one talked about localization, internationalization. So it's the way, some kind of theories that we can move how to get into closest to readership. Then we have equivalence, correspondence, covert and overt translation, information law, which is very important. Culture, we have context. We don't have just only context, but we have context. And especially all the sacred texts, they have space and time to control the meaning of that text. Number 3, in the world, we have so many standards. Why? We have to talk about translation standards. Because just one example, one very classic example, the root, the cause of World War II came from mistranslation of translators, Japanese translators and US translators. Very important.
Sorry to interrupt you, Professor.
could you conclude and because
Okay,
since we have
it's our time.
another team
Okay,
here.
I'm sorry. Too much information. Okay, we have 3 standards. We have ISO from Europe, the world standard. We have ASTM, American standards. We have GBT, only 3 standards. They have translation standards. That's why I would like to focus, because if we focus on just only our individual experience, then we cannot come to conclusion very easily. Okay, number 4, we have technology. So I propose that we can use CAT, computer-assisted translation. Why? Because we can determining common agreed translation that the chairman of the meeting always mentioned. Common agreed translation, this is glossary. Adding glossary to terminology, you can have millions or hundreds or whatever. We can find meanings from online dictionary. We can reducing translation time and increasing consistency. We can use repetitive words. We can have grammar and spelling check, and then we can maintain the original layout of the source text. I mean, indented marginal or whatever. This is comparison because someone talk of Bilala and cat. So I would like to propose cat. So we don't have time. So I come to other things. This is example. We can incorporate glossary into the archive of the program. For example, the archive creates term base to determine the most suitable words. For example, if translator 1 choose ภควาพระผู้มีพระภาคเจ้า and then they translate into the blessed one, translate into the enlightened one, but the common one, the agreed one by our chairman is the gracious one, for example. Then the gracious one will pop up on your monitor. Then you can just substitute use it very easily because it's already in there. The second is 100% repetitive statement, so it pop up 100%. If it's the same, I mean, it recurrent, it happens again. Even we can put 83%.
Yeah, Professor, I think that we can share that your presentation.
I have just only 2 slides to finish, please. Okay. And someone talked about repetition yesterday, right? So I think we have to keep repetition because it's rhetorical device according to how to write or how to translate. And then it's anaphora in the perspective of translation. Do we keep it? All the things like as in pond of blue lotus, water, rose, blue lotus. And now my last slide. Okay. So the program can help you to do something about the checking grammar, spelling, even terminology, and including layout, everything complete in one platform. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Your wonderful contribution, and hopefully that you can share this PowerPoint with our colleagues and they can concern on. And next, sorry for that missing that anyone from like Digha Nikaya team, those who are translating Digha Nikaya. So anyone is here, then you can take some about maybe 7 to 8 minutes to if you figure out any issues.
Yes, Bante, thank you very much. I'm here. Dr. Lemon couldn't come today, so I will excuse him on behalf of the team, which is Dr. Lemon and I. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm talking from Barcelona in Spain. So my name is Aleix Ruiz Falquez, and we met with some of you yesterday. I don't know if we are exactly the same people. So I'm in the Digha Nikaya team, and I already shared some ideas yesterday. Basically, in general, I completely agree with Venerable Brahmali, with Bhikkhu Brahmali. So I don't have much to add. What I could do is to share some ongoing work in the direction that Venerable has pointed out. So this is, I could share it also, and I will share it then with all participants, but this is the kind of abbreviated list based on the previous glossary. And as you can see, these are, I think, about 300 entries. And what I have been doing is, after going through the glossary, and there are two types of words that I have left out. So when I was trying to purge, I left out words that I think mostly all the editors considered or translators considered not very common. So I think the glossary is obviously not for very common words, so we can exclude them. And then there are also a number of words that everyone agrees on their meaning, and they are again not that important. Maybe they are not core concepts, and the translation, it doesn't seem to be very problematic. So I also have removed them, and with that I came up with 300 words. But I would tend to agree with Bhikkhu Brahmali, and I think we should aim at something like 100 words, something like that. Now, what I would like to ask for the topic that I think would be worth discussing would be on what principle. So what do we leave and what do we exclude? Or are we just going to go by our hunch or our feeling? Like I've done that to a certain extent. There are words like atta that I think should be there. Atta. There were a number of words in the vocabulary that were simply the negation of other words. So I don't think we need the negation except maybe for anatta, which is a very important concept. But if we have lova, then I don't think that we need a lova in the glossary. We don't need to replicate that. Also, there are words that are in the same family or derived from the same noun or from the same verb, so I don't think we need to repeat them. There was a lot of repetition here also. So, but my question, the question that I would like to discuss with you is, what would be the principle? Yesterday, I proposed that I would favor leaving the main list. So there are many lists, like the 4 noble truths, the 4 types of noble person. That maybe these words like sotapanna, maybe this is not immediately understandable for an English reader. The factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the 7 Bhojangas, the 4 Satipatthana, including the name Satipatthana. Then again, there are so many lists that if we go on with the list, then we will translate the entire Pitaka. So where do we establish the boundary? That is a question, and I'm not completely sure. And again, I would go with my instinct and say, okay, there are some like the 4 noble truths. It has to be there. How do we say the origin of suffering or the origination of suffering, or we translate dukkha in a different way? That probably has to be decided. And similarly, I think the epithets of the Buddha and names like Mara, we translate Mara, or we say that the evil one, or this type of names like Mara, Brahma. I guess Brahma, we leave it as it is. Mara probably as well. So Dr. Gornal yesterday was proposing that our glossary is not, or shouldn't be only a glossary for translators, but a glossary for readers. And I think that's usually how it is done in many English publications. And they have a glossary at the end that is to help the reader with words that are strange for the common English reader. So in that sense, then I would again think about this issue and leave those words, maybe some of them that are not going to be translated, and even those that are translated, then maybe the glossary can be also a sort of very short dictionary. There was a discussion when we started drafting the glossary, because at some point it seemed that, well, were we talking about the glossary, like a one-to-one correspondence, or to a sort of a small dictionary to see how we understand certain words? And when we are having these discussions, I see that sometimes we're actually discussing about the meaning, and that is necessary to come up with a proper equivalent. But at the end, the glossary is just to have an equivalent, right? So in that sense, I think also having some definitions at the end of the book would be useful. That is not a glossary for us, that is something for the reader. But again, that is something that can be done at the end. Yesterday, when we had the guest lecture by Professor Maria Hein, she said something that stuck to my mind because I think that is how usually things happen when we translate, that the final glossary will only come up at the end. So the final glossary will be the result of our translation, not the beginning, not the cause of our translation. But at the same time, it seems that we need a basic list. So to conclude, what I will do is I will share this reduced list of 300 words, and maybe that can be for the next step of our discussion. Maybe some of you will consider that there are words that are missing, so we can include them, and hopefully we all agree on reducing it to maybe 100, so that we can try to discuss and see which words are not to be there. But the question again, so I would appreciate if other contributors and other translators could share what would be their principles for accepting or not accepting a word in the glossary. So which types of words do we include and which types of words do we don't include? So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Alex. And next, any representative from team of Samyutta Nikaya, I can see that the professors are here. So if you still would like to raise some issues or concern something, that you are welcome. 8 to about 8 minutes. Yeah, Professor Somaratna is there. Would you like to still?
Okay, sir, I am now talking of state. Sorry, okay, now on. Okay, good afternoon. So I also basically agree with what Venerable Brahmali and Dr. Alex already stated. So we need to have some sort of maybe glossary, and I can say that what we really need is a working glossary at this level, working glossary, so the glossary to work on, and but while we are maybe doing the translation and in different stages of the process, so we can come to certain better agreement. So at this moment, of course, we can say, okay, we agree, but it may not really, still we are actually studying, so we may not be really 100% sure that what kind of terminology are coming. So if we agree sort of a basic working glossary at this level, limiting it to a certain key area, in my opinion, when it comes to the suttas, so what we need to agree on is the key doctrinal terminology. So just like in Vinaya, the key Vinaya terminology, Abhidhamma terminology. So what those basic doctrinal terminologies like connected to Paticca Samuppada, or the Punapashot, or the Khanda, Ayatana, Dhatu, and all these things I think we need to agree on. And also we need to agree on the noble person, so liberated person, like we have in that list the Ubbato Bhaka Vimutta, Panya Vimutta, or this Ceto Vimutta, or Ceto Vimutta, Panya Vimutta. So this kind of terminology, and Fire Shakti, I think sometimes body weakness or this kind of terms translations are there, whether we agree in that to be in that working glossary. So also noble is so far. So those key terminologies, I think with regard to them, we can agree on at this level. At the same time, keeping in mind very specialized terms when we are coming across in our text. So we need to have some sort of platform where we can even put them there so that for the others consideration at another stage of discussion. So if you go with that, I think it will be easier. And also I agree with Venerable Brahmali, so that we need to have some very specialized glossaries for the suttas and the Abhidhamma and the Vinaya. So that's also maybe important to consider. That of course can also develop as the translation process is going on, not at the very beginning. But at the very beginning we can come to a certain agreement on a certain term. While the translation is going on, the other things we can agree on. And another maybe issue could be sort of in our text, like if you are translating into the modern period, modern age, so that we need to consider the gender issues, like so whether we need to use all the time he or she. Very rarely we come across with she. So is it a matter? Do we need to consider and do some care for that also in this translation? So whether we need to come with a neutral terminology. So these are also maybe something that at one stage we need to care. I think if we want to put this into sort of modern context and modern generation, and like this internationalization context what the earlier presentation mentioned. So we can also I think as translators, I think some sort of facilitation also need to be there. I think if we have a sort of software so that we can use for translation, that will be also helpful. I think whether it's available or not, I don't know. But yes, those are things that I can just at this moment I can say. So basically, I agree with this what earlier presenters mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for your valuable contribution. So we have next Anguttara Nikaya team that no one present at the moment. So next I would like to turn back to Khuddaka Nikaya team. I think here like Dr. Alestia here.
Yes.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hi everybody. So yeah, I agree with pretty much what has been said so far. So I think just to kind of add on to what others have said, I think 100 terms as a guide sounds reasonable. I think because we will never all agree on each word, and we probably don't want to have a discussion about every single word. We need a easier and quicker solution about how we will render those terms. So I think the idea of simply turning to the most thoroughly researched and latest scholarly contribution, namely Cohen's dictionary, and use those meanings given in that dictionary for the terms we choose would be the most efficient way of moving forward. And then, of course, relating to the professor's presentation just now about technological tools that could be used, as long as we agree on the definitions of these words, we can change those later as long as everyone has consistently used the same one, or they can be easily uncovered, right? And so if we all agree on using Cohen's dictionary, and then later on we decide actually this rendering is not a great one, the fact that we've all used Cohen's dictionary means that we can quite easily edit that without a problem. And so I wouldn't say, if we kind of pragmatically speaking, just agree on using a particular dictionary's definitions of these words, then we can kind of kick the can down the road in terms of actually trying to refine some of these terms if we so wish. What terms should we use? So I would just focus on key Buddhist doctrinal terms, maybe taking them from a hand list which is based on the entire canon rather than a particular Nikaya. So for instance, Nyanatiloka's Buddhist dictionary, not using his definitions, but simply using that list. I think there's only about 300 terms in that, but you could just narrow it down to 100 from that, and then using Cohen's definitions of each term rather than Nyanatiloka's. Epithets, honorifics, and then finally some formulaic expressions, simply opening formulas to the suttas and things like that, which, if they weren't consistent, may be jarring to the reader who's kind of browsing between volumes. So yeah, that would be just to kind of add on to what everyone says. I agree with the 100 words. Use Cohn's definitions. Take Buddhist technical terms from readily available hand lists which cover the Abhidhamma and the Nikayas already, such as Jnana Yoga's list. And then add to that epithets, honorifics, and some formulaic expressions. So that would be my opinion on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Alex. And next, the team who translate Abhidhamma Pitaka. First, I would like to hear from Professor Charles. Professor, could you turn on your microphone, please?
Apologies. Good afternoon, everybody. I certainly agree with all the main points that have been made so far. The idea of a short glossary around is a very sensible target, and I think using the Penn dictionary as the basis for meanings, I would also support that. I don't think I have anything other than to say that the idea of specialist glossaries for individual Abhidhamma volumes would, I think, be very helpful in addition to the broad central glossary. However, one of my colleagues on the Abhidhamma team, and by the way, could I add that Dr. Sarah Shaw, who would have been here, is travelling today, so she sends her apologies. She very much like to be here, but she can't be with us today. But one of our colleagues on the Abhidhamma team, Dr. Patampong Bodhi Prasiddhanam, does have some points which he'd like to add. So, Bodhi, could I ask you to add your comments now? Bodhi? You're muted, I think.
Thank you very much. I have 3 observations to make at the moment. Firstly, it is about glossary. I think I find myself in agreement with that, because the publishing house or sponsoring agencies can certainly set up certain criteria for translator everywhere, not only in Southeast Asia but also in European countries or the United States as well. So it is a good idea to have certain criteria. It means that we are not given absolute freedom to translate. With regard to the glossaries, I think we should have the translation of the stock phrase or stock interest similarly as well. We may ask Most Venerable Brahma Moli to produce a draft translation to be agreed upon by other leaders of the translation group, I think. Then we can have a unique translation across the Pali canonical text of this version. The second one is about some terminology. I think I may not look at the glossary while translating the text. I may look at the context first, because the true meanings can be obtained only when we check the context, right? And if I have specific meaning which is different from the, definition given by the editorial board, I may suggest to them to add the definition, a new definition from the text I discover, because now it is too soon to have summaries of the definition. We have just started. I have tried to read relevant information at the moment. I haven't started translation yet, so I cannot provide a true definition of many Abhidhamic terminologies at the moment. But in the course of translation, definitely, if I have some things new, I may I may propose to the leaders of the translation group of Abhidhamma in this context, the culture, and then submit it further to the editorial staff member. So it would be very flexible depending on who has more reasonable explanation about the definition of the term actually. As translators, we have to remind that the true meanings must be obtained when we check the context only. And I think that all the Pali and Sanskrit scholars of this project can manage to check Vedic dictionaries, Pali dictionaries, Prakrit dictionaries, and several other things as well before they produce a translation. The second one, I think, is something which is Professor Maria Hyde did not mention yesterday. I think we have to make clear right from the very beginning that we shall not be going to have diacritical marks of Pali and Sanskrit as well. It seems that Most Venerable Prabhupada said that he tried this translation to be accessible to the general public. But if you have diacritical marks, it could be, a big obstacle for the general public. So, in my opinion, we should have diacritical marks of plain Sanskrit word by the ends of the translation book, or as an appendix, or when we're trying to translate glossary, we may put Pali and Sanskrit with diacritical marks in bracket or something like that. It should be better. And the third point is about Pali and Sanskrit terminologies. I think it is very important to mention right from the very beginning that we must use only Pali terminologies, not Sanskrit ones. For example, Kamma or Dharma is throughout the Pali canonical text. Even though, we translate Vinaya, Utanta or Abhidhamma, stick to Pali terminology rather than Sanskrit. So these are the 3 points that I would like to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Charles and Professor Patmapong, for your valuable suggestions and process that translation that you are engaged in. So now we have opportunity to listen to the chairman of this Tripitaka English version translation project. So I would like to invite the most honorable chairman to make some comments that our translators what they requested.
My question goes to you, Viratana, because you are in the glossary compiling team that has brought out about more than 900 terms in this glossary. Now, what in your mind, in your group, when you select almost 1,000 terms in the glossary list, what is the reason of doing that? And then it is suggested to be cut it down to 100. What is your opinion? I'm moderator now, asking you.
Most honorable sir, at the beginning, the list actually we received from Alex, and it over like 1,390 something at the beginning. So we got very short period of time to go through all the maybe some similar terms are appearing or they are not something to concern that much. So first we thought that this is time to prepare at least shortening the terms to be at least 1,000. So when we had a first meeting that we were discussing about this glossary, so we suggested, and in the list actually they provided almost over 1,394 words to be used as the glossary. So finally, when we go through some terms, we found some commonness. So we try to at least conclude into 1,000. So it's still now with this discussion, I'm not sure. Even myself, I translate Apadana. So I have nothing much to do with this glossary, because especially as those who know about Jataka Pali and Apadana, the many terms those are related to flora and fauna. So they are not in this glossary. So I have to use some very different dictionary in order to translate. But I think such terms what we have listed here, given the translation, of course, that if it is possible, maybe we can limit into some number of words into be I'm not sure it can be concluded into 100 or not, because with the content, as I mentioned very early also, they are representing different contexts with even the one word. So in such case, I'm not sure, I'm not only the one to concern about this, but our most honorable Dean, the faculty, graduate school, and also himself, maybe he has some idea to share.
and also respected chairman, as said by Venerable Viratana, because we got the first, the original list from Alex, right? So we have very short time, so we consider according to the first draft, and then we made a comment. Some words, some terms should be deleted, and we discussed a lot about there are many words in some book, like in the book by Venerable P.A. Payutto, Dictionary of Buddhism, and we discussed that we should have only the doctrinal term, the term like a general term, or the term in ordinary life should not be included. Thank you so much.
Venerable Brahmali has proposed two things, if I'm not mistaken. One is to have the list of 100 terms for the three Nikaya, the three Tipitaka. And the other proposal is that for each Pitaka, we have a separate list of terminology. So in this case, if that is the case, the total number of the term in terminology would exceed 100. Venerable Brahmali, can you elaborate this proposal that you have made?
Thank you, the idea is just that there are a number of terms that are used across all the Nikayas, core terms like Bhagava, for example, that you find everywhere, and of course the core doctrinal terms of Buddhism are also found in the Abhidhamma as well as the Sutras, and occasionally even the Vinaya. So it's obvious that these are commonalities that we can use across the board if we wish. But then again, the idea is also that when it comes to things like the Vinaya Pitaka, it is very clearly the case that the terms that are really important there, that tell us how to understand the rules, in particular how to understand Sangha Kama, and these kind of things, they're actually very different from what you find in the rest of the Tipitaka. And for that reason, I think it is very important that there are such extra terminology, extra glossary, extra index, whatever you want to call it, for the Vinaya, and the same, I think, for the Abhidhamma. As for the Sutta Pitaka, I don't know what that team wants to do. I don't really have any position on the Sutta Pitaka, whether they want to have an additional glossary or not. I'm going to have to leave that to the Sutta Pitaka team to discuss and decide how they want to operate that kind of thing. So, thank you.
If it is necessary to have a separate list of terminology for different Pitaka, information like the number of Pitaka, that is Vinaya Pitaka, in Sayamarata edition is 8 volumes. Suttanta Pitaka, 25 volumes. If you want to create consistency in 25 volumes, I think that we have to create the common list of terminology for these 25 volumes of Suttanta Pitaka. Then come to Abhidhamma, 12 volumes. I think we have different scholars translating Abhidhamma. Maybe we need another list